Well, my name is Al Goodman. I was born January 24th, 1924 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I grew up during the Depression. I was in grade school, and we used cardboard in the shoes. I'm sure you've heard the stories of the Depression. My folks lost their home, and we moved into a much smaller house that they rented. I do remember that the walls were not too well insulated. We had ice on them, and my mother always was fighting against everybody, and she had a recording thermometer in the living room to prove to the people that the house wasn't livable. And we were there for about 2 or 3 years when my father got back into the workforce, and we moved back to our original house. But we didn't have anything. I guess we didn't know we were poor. We had a fireplace. My mother used the fireplace to cook in and eat and heat there, and we just made the best we could with what we had.
And you had one sibling?
I have one sibling, my sister Julia, and she's 4 years younger than me.
Okay. What did your parents do? Your mom ran the household, I presume. What
Yes.
did your dad do for a living?
My dad was a furniture salesman, and my mother actually, during her life, she sold encyclopedias. My mother was always contributing in some way to keep the family going, but my dad, the business, wasn't too good during the Depression, but then he ended up working for a fairly large furniture company and was a very successful salesman.
How did the Depression shape you?
Gave us a greater appreciation of what we had. I remember one Christmas when my folks didn't have any money, and I was going to be playing football, and my dad somehow or another found and bought a football helmet. And I never knew how he did it, but they were always trying to take care of us kids and make sure we didn't lack for anything. Although we didn't know what we were lacking because we really didn't have anything.
Yeah. Were your parents born and raised in Milwaukee, Al?
No, my dad was born in Covington, Kentucky, Carlisle, Kentucky, and my mother was born in Chicago.
Oh. What brought them to Milwaukee?
I have no idea. They basically got married in Milwaukee, and that's where they wanted to end up. And they had no relatives there. As far as I know, they had no reason to come to Milwaukee, but they did.
Wow. So, what do you remember most about growing up in Milwaukee?
Well, growing up, I grew up in a fairly decent suburb of Milwaukee called Shorewood. I went to a very good school. I never was a tremendous student, but I played hockey in high school, and other than that, I could say my career was not very distinguished.
So what happened after high school?
I spent a semester at Milwaukee State Teachers College. It didn't cost much. We still didn't have a lot of money. I walked to school to save the dime from riding a local bus. And during that time, my dad and we had apple trees in the backyard, and every Sunday, my dad used to make apple pie, and we were making apple pie one Sunday afternoon when we heard that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. I worked at the school in the cafeteria for my meals, and on that next Monday, I was working in the cafeteria when they had Roosevelt gave his famous speech about Day of Infamy, and that changed everybody's outlook. We had no idea what was going to happen or what to do, and we tried to go on just as we were. Mm-hmm. I wanted to get into the Air Force because I'd always been interested in being a pilot, and my mother signed the papers so I could go take the test, and and finally got in 1942 in the fall of 42, and was called active duty in 1943 in February.
Wow. How did your interest in planes and flying planes start? Did that start as a young kid?
That started as a very young kid. My folks took me to an air show at Glenview Naval Air Station, and that's where the bug was born.
Really?
I saw them flying those airplanes, and I thought, that's for me. I think I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Really? So did you follow planes? Did you build planes, models? How did you keep it going?
Yeah, I built models, and I know when I had to write a theme, everything was toward the Army Air Corps. I was writing, plagiarizing everything I read about the Air Force and all about the airplanes, and that's where I wrote up all my themes in English and so forth. So it was always a desire right there from the beginning.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about your service in the Air Force.
I was called into excuse me, active duty in February of 43. We took our basic training in Texas. The Air Force was not ready for all of us. They called all of us in that were in college and sent us back to college because they didn't have the training facilities to take care of the influx of new enlistees. So I was sent back to University of Tennessee. I spent 6 weeks there, got 10 hours in an airplane, and then we went right through, finished on and went right through training. We had 2 months in pre-flight, 2 months at primary, 2 months at basic, 2 months in advanced, and then we did our transition training and went to combat.
What was the first plane that you flew as a pilot?
A J-5 Cub.
And tell me about that plane.
It was just 65 horsepower engine, canvas, two-seater, sat one behind the other. It was yellow in color, which they've always been. Okay. And what they did is they were trying to screen us out. In other words, if you got sick in those 10 hours, you didn't go on to pilot training. So that was a case of just a cursory exam to see whether to spend the time and money to send you on to pilot training.
And you made it.
I was lucky. I made it.
So how did that feel when you did that for the first time?
I have the book. It has all the records of my flights, and I noticed that I was rather nervous. That's what the instructor said, but I was doing what I was supposed to do, and it was a whole new thing. I mean, I'd never been on an airplane before.
Wow.
So they just said it was, that I'd make it, but I was nervous, and I finally settled down a little bit more.
Now, that flight, did you have to do anything like did you have to do maneuvers and things
Yeah,
like that?
we did. We had learned to spin the airplane and do some. A Cub wasn't made for acrobatics particularly.
Okay.
So there were certain things that we did that brought you coordination, got you working so that you could make the airplane do what you wanted it to do.
So I understand that you're a Purple Heart veteran. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what happened?
It was on our 12th mission, and we were supposed to go and bomb, if I remember correctly, Linz, Austria or somewhere. And it was a cloudy day, and we climbed up. When you went into the clouds, you just automatically spread the formation apart and flew a heading until you got on top of the clouds. The idea was so you didn't run into each other. And we got up on top of the clouds. We were right where we were supposed to be. And I was a co-pilot, the man that was the captain said that wasn't our formation, and I said it was, and he said it wasn't, and he decided we were going to go back home. And we left the formation, and the navigator hadn't evidently kept track of two things because we started back and we came across a nest of anti-aircraft fire, which managed to damage our airplane, wounded me, and wounded our tail gunner, and took out, and I'm not sure, I haven't gotten all the details, but I know we lost one engine, possibly two, and we landed on an island off the coast of Yugoslavia called Viz, and I was there that they got me into the hospital, and luckily worked on me, and that's why I'm here today.
Yeah, amen to that. What kind of aircraft were you flying?
It was a B-24 Liberator 4-engine bomber.
And how many people are inside that plane now?
10.
10. Okay.
Yeah. We had pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, and then gunners for the nose, the top turret, the ball, and the tail, and two in the waist.
And what happened? What was your injury?
Well, I got hit. The Germans had us bracketed, and there were just 5 explosions. One was right level with us, and then there were 2 above, and one of the pieces of shrapnel came down in through the cockpit window on the top and hit me in the shoulder and went down into me, and then at the hospital they cut me open and found what they were looking for.
So what happened after that?
Well, I spent some time in this hospital, which was a little Quonset hut on this island. They didn't have much there. And then I was flown back to Italy, put in an American hospital, and they operated on me again and patched me up and sent me home. Said, we can't use you anymore.
Wow, and that was after how many years in the service? 2.5?
Well, this was, I got in 43. This was in December of 44.
Okay.
So it wasn't too long, not quite a year.
Got it. Do you still keep in touch with some of the guys? Or have you?
There aren't any of them left.
Yeah.
Well, there are 2. I have not kept in touch with them, no. One of them was a gunner. I did see him. I made it a habit when I was flying for the corporations. I knew where they lived, and I saw him. He lives in New Jersey, and I ran into the navigator, who I think is in Delaware right now. I'm not sure if they're still alive, but
Okay.
as far as I know, the rest of the crew is all dead.
Okay. So when you got home, you healed up, and then what happened?
I went back to school and got a degree at Marquette University.
Oh, okay, Marquette.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
It was very interesting. We were behind, so we went to school, and the object was get done as fast as we can, because, you know, we're not 18-year-old kids anymore. We were all 21, 22 years old, and we had to do something to catch up. So basically, I got done in a little over 3 years.
Okay. When did you meet Helen, your first wife?
At Marquette.
At Marquette.
Yeah.
And you dated for a while and then
Yeah,
you married?
I had been dating somebody, and I met her, and we were part of they had what they called the Veterans Brigade. I mean, those of us that had been in service kind of formed our own group, because everybody else was so young and immature, according to us. And I met her, and we started dating, and we got married in 1951.
In 1951.
Yeah.
And then I understand you chose to adopt?
Well, we had a child that didn't live, and then we decided to adopt.
Okay.
We adopted a boy, Bill, and then we started the adoption proceedings on the second. I mean, it takes time. I mean, we started the proceedings before Bill was born. I mean, it just took a lot of time, and this was in the state of Wisconsin.
Okay.
They would make unannounced visits to our house to see whether we were worthy of adopting a child. I mean, they really ran you through the ringer. And we started the adoptions of a second little boy when she passed away. So the question became whether I would keep the second boy since I wasn't married. And all the people that I worked with, all the gals said, "Oh yeah, he's going to get married again. He's going to get married again." And so the process started, and then I married Barbara.
Okay.
And so then she had to go through the whole adoption proceedings for both kids to make sure she was understood they were still her kids too. So
okay,
and that's how it went.
So back up just a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Helen passed away.
Helen passed away, in 1961.
Okay.
Bill was born in 57.
Okay. So you and Helen raised Bill.
We started to, we had him for probably 6 months to a year before Bob. I don't have the dates right on my fingertips, but I know that we brought Bob in, and they were both there when she passed away. So they were, I think, 3 and 4 years of age when she died.
Wow. Now, how did adoption work back then? I'm just curious. Is there an agency that you worked with, or a hospital?
We worked with the state of Wisconsin.
Okay.
And both the boys were born in Wisconsin and came in through that system.
Okay, got it. And then Helen passed away. You had the 2 boys, and how did you meet Barbara?
I had met her before. She worked for the same company I was flying for.
Okay.
And she had met Helen. We'd been to some parties, and so she had known Helen. And of course, at the time, I knew Barbara, but that was because she scheduled the airplane once in a while, and
okay.
that was. But then, well, we went out a few times, and some of the people thought we ought to really get together, and we decided, well, we go out on our own. So one thing led to another, and here we are with a whole bunch of kids and grandkids.
55 years of marriage.
Yeah, 55 years.
That's fantastic. Now, you said that you met Barb when you were working at the same place. What was that place?
That was the Milwaukee Gas Light Company in Milwaukee.
Okay.
And she worked for the president. And they bought an airplane. I was selling airplanes. They bought this airplane, and they made me an offer to come work for them, which I did. And that's how I met her.
And that started your career of
Well, that was where I started corporate. I had been flying charter and selling airplanes before that.
Okay. In Milwaukee?
In Milwaukee.
Okay. How long did you do that?
I started working there in 1951. I came in as a bookkeeper.
Oh.
Because I had a degree from Marquette, and pretty soon I had more experience than the pilots that they were hiring. And one thing led to another, and I became chief pilot and was a vice president of the company.
Okay.
I was selling charter and selling airplanes and flying.
Okay, so you and Barbara, you had the 2 boys. That was in the early 60s.
Yeah, we got married in 1962.
Okay. So I have to ask this, where were you when JFK was assassinated?
I was working at the gas company.
Do you remember that day?
I did, yes. When I wasn't flying, I was working market research.
Oh.
And I was in the office working, and we had a radio there, and we heard about it. I mean, I heard about it on Sunday that he had been shot, but we got all the words. Everything was Monday was when I started really, the funeral and a whole bit.
Okay. What was it like then? What was the country? Was it similar to your experience with Pearl Harbor, where people were just sort of paralyzed and didn't know?
It was a very shaky thing. I mean, nobody knew anything. I mean, we had television and all that, but it was kind of weird. You just didn't really know what had happened and how and why. And frankly, it was a little personal to me because I had flown Jack Kennedy and
really,
when he was running for president. So was a little bit personal, but
So tell me about that.
well, I'll go back a ways. Joe McCarthy, who many people remember as Tail Gunner Joe, was a congressman, I believe, or a senator from Wisconsin.
Yes.
And he died. And a gentleman by the name of William Proxmire was running for his seat. Proxmire was going to give a talk in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and he invited Kennedy, who was a senator, to come and talk. And I inherited the job of flying Kennedy. They came into Milwaukee, and I flew them up to Green Bay. And there was no local senator was on board, and I forget, there were about 3 or 4 guys I took up there. Then afterward, I took them back to Midway Airport, because in those days, Capital Airlines did not fly from Milwaukee to Washington. They flew from Midway to Washington. So I took them to Midway. And when I got back to the home, I was straightening out the airplane, and I found Kennedy's wallet in the airplane. And I put it in the company safe, and then the next day I shipped it to him. And then on Saturdays, I had the job of flying the Milwaukee Journal to the University of Wisconsin football games. And I was getting ready to go, and a phone rang, and they wanted to know, if I was the guy that found Kennedy's wallet. Now, nobody knew about it, but the papers knew about it somehow. And they said, you found his wallet? Yeah. How'd you know whose it was? I said, well, it had JFK written on it. The next question was, how much money was in it? Well, these guys, I mean, I knew most of these reporters, but they're worse than attorneys.
Yeah.
Excuse me, John. And they wanted to know, everything. Well, I told them, I said, I don't know how much money was in it. Well, I knew exactly what was in it, because I wasn't about to send it back without what it had. And so then he said, well, are you going to take the reward? And I said, what's the reward? And they said, well, it's a copy of his book, Profiles in Courage. And I said, I haven't heard about it. I haven't read it. I don't know anything about it. Well, long story short, I got an autographed copy of the book, plus a nice letter. Then later, when he was running for president, the Kennedys owned a Convair, which was at that time was a twin-engine airliner. And the airplane could not go into a lot of the little cities that they wanted to go into. So they called Purdue University, who had an aviation program. They trained pilots, and they had DC-3s. And the guy at Purdue said, no, you call Al Goodman up in Milwaukee, he can arrange it for you. Well, I got 5 small airplanes. And they showed up at the gate, and I introduced myself, and Kennedy says, I remember you, Al, I flew with you before. And so anyway, we spent about 5 or 6 days just shuttling him around from small airport, small town to small town, and that's my claim to fame. In 1967, I don't recall, when we had the big snowstorm and O'Hare was shut down, Milwaukee was open, and Ferris and Neil Armstrong were stuck in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I flew out and brought them back.
In that storm? Out of that storm?
Well, no, the storm was over, but the airport was open.
Okay.
O'Hare wasn't open yet.
Wow.
So, of course, sitting there with a guy like Neil Armstrong in the back seat, you did the perfect, no questions asked, just show them how professional we were.
Yeah.
We were.
Yeah.
So,
well, and the CEO of United.
And the CEO of United, yeah. I flew co-pilot for him. He got a rating, and I flew co-pilot for him.
Okay.
But other than that.
What was your favorite plane to fly?
Well, I probably the litter jets because I had more experience in that than anything else.
Okay.
I flew the turboprop Gulfstreams where one time we took a bunch of golfers from Moline to Michigan, but they were all pretty much second-rate golfers. You know, they all not the ones you knew about. But I met Palmer, I met Jack Nicklaus. I met a lot of people through this. I belong to an organization of pilots, and you meet once a month and eat and drink and tell lies. But I don't go anywhere. I don't want to be out on the highway at 10 o'clock at night coming down from Milwaukee after
you got a golf game the next morning,
having
right?
well, no, having a nog or two. You know,
Yeah,
it just
right.
doesn't make sense. And if you can't drink and listen to go up there, then there's no sense in going.
What do you like to drink?
Basically, I'm a gin drinker.
Okay.
And I found out the other day that gin berries that they make gin with are good for your health. So.
Oh. Did you ever smoke?
Yeah, I did. Oh, yeah.
What'd you smoke?
Anything and everything. Well, during service, we got cigarettes for free. So.
Okay.
And that was part of the problem when we flew the missions. We put oxygen masks on at 10,000 feet. And when we got back down to 10,000 feet again, everybody lit up. And the B-24 leaked a lot of gas. And why more airplanes didn't blow up, I'll never know. And I smoked, and I finally quit about the time I got married.
Okay.
And
And never took it up again.
never touched it again.
But a little gin never hurt anybody.
That's what I found
It's
out.
good for you.
Now the juniper berry is supposed to have some good.
Yeah. So, what other stories you got about flying guys around?
Well, my last job I was flying Def Leppard. For 23 days I was out on the road with them.
Now, how are those guys?
Fantastic. They were great.
Really? Now, what year is that, Al?
This was probably about 1984. 99.
99? Okay.
Was that okay?
So you met Joe Elliott and
Oh, yeah.
and the whole gang.
The whole gang, sure.
Wow.
They didn't drink.
Okay.
Had a little beer once in a while, but mostly it was drinking tea. They were all soccer fans,
Okay.
and they were getting tapes of some of the games, and so we'd end up someplace and we'd land, and they wouldn't get off the airplane until the game was over. They were watching it on tape, and but they were. I went to all the concerts, you know, and it's not my type of music particularly.
Okay.
But we had a good time, you know, going watching them all the time.
So speaking of music, are you a musician by chance?
I played drums with the American Legion Drum and Bugle Corps, but that was all. I never really followed through on it.
Okay. Is that how John, your son,
No.
picked up the habit? Or?
No, that was long before John.
Okay. Okay.
So, no, that was back when I was still in high school.
Tell me a little bit about Barbara.
Well, she's a hell of a woman. Barbara and I got married, and we've basically, it was quite interesting. I mean, we laugh about it today. We had a very, very nice wedding. My folks accepted her, and we just basically, at the time I was working for the same company, and it was just an easy metamorphosis. We just kind of grew from there.
Okay.
And our first son was born, I know, not quite a year after we got married, and it was John, or first it was Dan, and then Jim was a year later, and Julie and John were a group, but they were a couple of years behind. So
Okay.
we've just been I would say, a pretty close-knit family.
That's wonderful.
You know,
How would you describe Barbara? Give me some words and
a lady,
okay.
always there for everybody. We just went Christmas shopping for for Christmas cards yesterday. She bought 100 Christmas cards. Now, that's family and extended. I mean, she's got a lot of friends. She's a bridge player. Everybody loves her. And she's just a fantastic lady. First of all, she's put up with me all these years. And I'm not the easiest person in the world to get along with. So, but no, it's very close, I think. We're very proud of our kids, and we live for them.
Tell me more about your kids.
Well, where do you want me to start?
Just start from the top. Start from the top.
Okay, the first one was Bill, who we adopted. Bill spent 13 years in service and decided that he liked Maine, so when he retired, got out of service, he would move to Maine. Our relationship with him has not been as close because he always lived away.
Okay.
And he was married to a gal. He divorced her, but he had a son. And we've been in touch with him. Then Bob, growing up, Bob never didn't like our way of life. He didn't like the rules and the rest of it, so he didn't spend a lot of time with us. Finally, he woke up and decided to come home. And he's been divorced a couple of times. He has a couple of daughters. And he lives in Milwaukee, so we still see him on main occasions. Then after that, we laugh and talk about then the next four. Dan is a psychologist. He graduated from Creighton University in DePaul. He's got his doctor's degree. And Julie, our daughter, oh wait a minute, no, that's Jim is next, right? I keep losing track here. Jim is the handyman of the group, and he's married and got 3 daughters. And then after that comes Julie, and she's...
Where does Jim live?
Jim lives out in Poplar Grove area in Illinois.
Okay.
Dan lives downtown, or is in Palatine.
Palatine, okay.
Then our daughter Julie lives in Lincoln Park. She works for a bank in the real estate division. And she went to school at the University of South Florida. And then we've got John, who you know.
Yep.
And I don't need to tell you about John. John lives in Green Oaks, and John has a law degree and does not practice law, though.
Right, right.
So.
Tell me about your grandkids.
Okay. Bill had 2 kids. He had one boy that he had with his wife, and then he married a gal in Maine, and they adopted a boy who came from a bad home. Bill's wife was a school teacher, and she knew about this boy, and they adopted him, and he is now married and got 1 daughter and has another child on the way. Bob had the 2 daughters, each of whom, one had 2 daughters and the other one has got, I believe, 3 sons. I'm not sure. She lives in Arizona now. We don't see her.
Okay.
Dan's got 2 boys, one in college and one in high school. Julie never married. Jimmy's married and got 3 little girls. And John's got 3 boys.
Fantastic. Now, I understand, John told me that you became Catholic.
I did.
How did that happen, and what year did that happen, and what prompted you to do that?
Okay. My family background is Jewish.
Okay.
I was brought up as a Christian Scientist. My mother got involved with that with her mother because they had my mother's brother came out of World War I with mental problems. And my grandmother took up the Christian Science religion, so my mother followed through. And that's how I was brought up. I was educated at Marquette University, which is a Catholic school. My first wife was Methodist. I joined the Methodist Church. Then I got married to Barbara, and for many years I did not participate, although I was involved. And finally, about a year and a half ago, she talked about would I like to learn a little bit about Catholicism. So I did, and that led me right into the trap where all of a sudden I was there, and I thought, yeah, I better, go follow through, and really, I decided I should do it. Now, I have, with my original upbringing as a Christian Science, I've always had a faith in God, which has brought me through what happened to me in service. I had a ruptured appendix at one time. I've had cancer. So I have a very strong faith. Mm-hmm. And in my way, it all comes from the same book, and it's just a different interpretation. Mm-hmm. Now, I put that together a little bit because when our bomb group had reunions after the war, and our two chaplains died, and I took over and did the prayers at the services. So,
was that right?
It's been kind of fun. So it's like I say, I follow what I have decided to do. I mean, I'm now considered a Catholic, and I go through the rituals. And
so did you go through RCIA then?
Yes, I did.
Just a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. What do you like about the Catholic Church, or has anything really changed? Did you just want to see that process through?
I wanted to be part of the family because I was on the outside a little bit. I mean, I went to church, mm-hmm. but I didn't really participate.
Okay.
Now I feel like I participate.
That's great.
And if and all these grandkids, why doesn't Grandpa go to church or whatever? So I just felt that this was the thing to do, not only for my own benefit, but for the family.
Sure.
To be part of it.
What's your parish, Al?
St. Paul.
St. Paul.
St. Paul the Apostle.
In Gurnee. Okay.
In Gurnee, right.
Got it. Got it. Is Barbara involved with the parish?
Well, no, not really. Her health hasn't been all that good, but I mean, she's very active as far as being brought up Catholic, and I mean, really lives her religion.
What kind of hobbies do you have? What do you like to do?
Right now, I'm pretty much into putting all the books together of all. My dad kept all the letters I wrote home in service. Uh-huh. And I'm putting all that stuff into loose leaf notebooks, getting it all together. I've got all my records from service and so forth. And I have some letters that my father sent home from World War I, so my daughter and I have been talking about collating these things and putting them together and possibly writing a little book or something. We just haven't gone on. And other than that, I play golf.
That's great. That's great. So you've got all these grandkids. What kind of advice would you have? Do you give advice to your children and your grandchildren at all?
No.
Okay. If you were, what advice would you give folks in general on marriage?
Just be honest. and support the other person.
How about money? Do you have any philosophy on money or any practices or habits?
No, but the thought, having grown up in the Depression, I mean, I don't think that you ever have enough. I mean, whether it's in goods or actual cash, I mean, you're always thinking about, what if, and so I tend to be kind of a tightwad at times.
So where do you golf?
Ponnybrook and Waukegan.
Do you have a tee time?
I play with a whole bunch of guys. There's probably about 40 of us.
Wow, 40?
Yeah, and we play Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Okay.
And we play different team games. Monday and Friday we play what we call 3-ball, where you have a team of 4 and you take the 3 best scores, and we put $15 in the pot. And then on Wednesday it's just a scramble. And we got one guy that has a card on everybody. He writes our score down every time. And he has a ledger, how much money we won. And this year I've averaged 28 cents winning every time I play.
That's the bookkeeper in you coming out, right? That's great. That's great. So you golf. That's.
I'm not good. I'm not good. I'm the worst one there. I got the highest handicap, but they love to play with me because I do manage to keep. I don't hurt the teams, and sometimes I even help. So.
Have you ever had a hole-in-one?
Mm-hmm.
Where?
Ponnybrook.
Ponnybrook? Which hole?
Number 3.
Number 3. Is that a par 3?
It's a par 3.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about 150 yards over the creek.
Tell me about that experience.
Well, I hit the ball and the green slopes back towards us and slopes to the left, and I hit up on the right, and the ball rolled down, and I thought it went behind the pin. And the guys I was with said, no, it's in the hole. I didn't believe it till I got there. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, they've got my name on a plaque with all of hole-in-ones.
I like Ponnybrook. It's a nice place to.
Well, they're losing a lot of trees.
Oh, really?
Oh, they've been cutting
Was
trees.
it the ash trees? Or?
Well, they're all dying. I mean, these trees are 100 years old. They cut them down and the whole inside's hollowed out. So they've lost a lot of trees. But it's still a very pretty course.
Yeah, yeah. You know, your son's a musician. That's how we met, obviously. You had mentioned flying Def Leppard around, and that wasn't really your cup of tea in terms of musical taste. What kind of art do you enjoy, or do you have any favorite musicians or things like that?
Well, I go back to the Glenn Miller days, the big bands. I flew Rod Stewart for a few days. I flew Dionne Warwick. Really? So I've had a little touch of these people, you know. Rod Stewart was not too, we had 2 airplanes. The band flew in one and he flew in the other. The band airplane was the smoking airplane and the other one was no smoke. And maybe I'm telling, Rod Stewart had girlfriends. I mean, everybody knew that.
Sure, sure.
And my favorite story about him was Thanksgiving night. We ended up taking him to New York, and we were dropping him off. And this was the night before Thanksgiving. And he had a girl on board. And all the publicity, everybody was there. And we couldn't leave. The other airplane discharged, their guys refueled and headed for home, and we're sitting there on the ramp at LaGuardia, and we can't leave because this girl's on board, and she can't get off the airplane in front of all the people. And finally they left, and she was able to get off and get in the limo and go. So we got home pretty late that night, but you know, it's a great life out there. You see all this stuff that goes on.
What other, so Dionne Warwick, was she nice?
She was very cold. She had a armed bodyguard with her.
Oh boy.
And we just took her to New York.
Okay. Was Rod a nice guy? Or
Oh yeah, he was interested because he could stick his nose in the cockpit and see what was going on. I flew Charlton Heston back to California one time. But, you know, you try not to bother these people. You
Sure.
know, I mean, if
Yeah.
they're on board, you just
do your job.
give them a chance to sit back and relax and so
Yeah.
forth.
So you've had a long run in piloting planes. Do you fly anymore?
No,
Okay.
can't afford it.
Okay. Okay. What advice in terms of career? You've done a lot of things and had a long career in aviation. Let's imagine some of your grandkids said, "Hey, Grandpa, I need some career advice." What would you give them?
Make your career and then make enough money that you can buy your own airplane and fly.
All right, we'll end it there.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure, Al. Thank you so much. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much.